Well, I know you just met Leah, Sarah. Have you been able to? Did you
Okay.
check
Well,
her her
let,
character?
let me work that into a conversation here because that's part of
Okay.
it. Is I just want to have some friendly conversation. We are 41 strong here, and I will do the introductions. I keep being told I'm being terrible about not using last names, and I'm going to put some of this into the chat box as I do it. So, especially for people who may wander back from getting a beverage or something here. So let's start with. Let me start with Steve, and I'm going to type your name in here, and it's Zandt. So, hello, Steve. I've got a little bit of stuff I'm going to say about you here. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Some of this comes from the Banana Slug String Band's website, and some from um, Wikipedia. But it looks like your band was formed in 1985. It's based out of Santa Cruz, and you are self-described environmental educators, which describes someone else on the screen here. We'll get to in a moment. You focus on have been focusing on performance at schools, assemblies, music festivals, and as of 2015, had played as many as 150 shows a year. And that you've been to festivals in New Orleans, High Sierra Music Festival, and others. Just if anybody's paid attention to fun music for young people, you've got to have turned up on their radar. So I welcome you. And we'll go over here to another environmental educator, and I know her well enough. I'll spell her name correctly, and that's Sarah Hoxie, who is a person who, well, one of her albums, she says that she makes music for science, but it often ends up being music for adults because some of the references are uh, kind of involved, but very fun, very playful. Much of it, some of it very serious and sad. But I welcome you, and Leah, who I will type your name in here again, trying to respond to suggestions here. Sprecher. I get it right.
Correct.
And Leah has been one of the pleasures I have in this conference. Is it has allowed me to meet new people. I've reached out to people I know and respect. In this case, Sarah, and to a lesser degree, Steve. And he said, someone you really need to talk to is Leah, who is trained in musical theater, has done traveling shows, and done some really cool stuff there. Trained as a musical person at the Ray Bolger School of Comedy. I'm not part of Ray Bolger School of Music. Help me
Musical
out here.
theater. Musical
Musical theater.
theater.
Not close and wandered off the rails in that one. He has a one-woman show, and interestingly, and that's one of the things I hope we can talk about, has actually written successful commercials. So that's a whole different challenge, I would think. And so my goal, I'm going to get out of the way here, is simply to have you folks converse about how you produce material, how you're creative, what sort of things you wish you'd have known back then, and how people can use their creative ability to make music or collaborate. So with that, let's throw it out there. Let me start with Leah and ask, to what extent do you find collaboration important in your work?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I find collaboration incredibly important, that you don't have to, I think one thing early on that was hard for me is thinking that I have to do it all myself and that I have to have all the ideas. And, but when you collaborate with somebody else and you bounce ideas off of each other, you bring it to a greater product, don't you? So I love collaboration. Everything I do is a collaboration. The one woman show that you mentioned, which you would think wouldn't be a collaboration, is a collaboration. My husband's a comedy writer. He offers jokes a lot for the show. I'm the musical person, of course, so I have all this Broadway knowledge for the music, and but he offers a different perspective with, really sharp joke writing. So it really brings what I do to another level by having other people have input.
Thank you. And my wife just popped in and said, "Do you realize what you just said? No one respect to a lesser degree. It sounds like you're respecting Steve to a lesser degree." It's like, well, that's not what I meant.
That's
What
what
I
it
mean is,
sounded like. That's why I laughed.
oh, terrible. Oh God. Well, that I can't even claim that was intentional comedy. I have the privilege of knowing Steve through Sarah, and I haven't had as many interactions. But oh my God, music I love and respect. So my my apologies. So how about collaboration for you, Steve? I mean, you've produced so much music over the years. And it seems like the same band. So has it been kind of ongoing collaboration, or do you work with others as an educator? How does that work for you?
Yeah, let me tell you about that. But before we do that, I want to honor what Carol earlier said about getting the audience involved. And without a live audience and with Zoom, I've been trying to figure out how you get a Zoom audience involved. We aren't on Zoom here, but this is for all of you watching. If you're on a Zoom conference or something, all you have to do, and I found this makes it interactive, is you tell everybody how many of you are barefoot, and then you stick your feet up. So we can do that with just our group here.
Oh no. We're not gonna wanna.
Oh yes, we got some barefoot people. So it breaks the ice that way. Anyway, yeah.
Glad I showered and didn't have dirty feet.
Collaboration with the band, it's tough with a band because there's 4 strong egos in our band. And what I've learned through that process is to say less and listen more, and try to reserve some of what you are passionate about until the right moment, so that everybody can have their time. We've done a lot of collaboration, especially in the studio, producing 11 albums. And it's incredibly creative, but sometimes we get to some sticking points where we're mad at each other. I always hold the songwriter card though with that, and the rest of the band sort of respects that, and they're very happy when I give in on that. But I think the real key for me has been to try to say less and honor what people say.
Well, it's really impressive you've had such a lengthy collaboration. I mean, you look in a lot of excellent musicians, there's that tendency to want more of the spotlight, and they the men and women break away on their own, and it's understandable. But boy, man, I'm just impressed as heck with the body of work you've produced, and just they're fun and things that you can listen to and you want to share with people because you come away better for the experience. So I salute you for that. Now,
Thanks.
Sarah, you and Steve have known each other for a while, and I guess you're both poets too. And I mean, and that's a part of it. So you, without getting too personal, you pass stuff back and forth, and you bounce ideas off each other. You and Steve collaborate, or how does that work for you?
No, I am so all alone in this world because I did not my I don't have a lot of musicians. Well, my kids, my son's a musician, and my sister, but just the people around me. So Steve has been a great inspiration and a great friend. We've been swapping poetry and music for years and years, and so when it comes to like collaborating, I mean, we've done some collaborating on river trips and stuff, and it's just always great to get feedback. He's given me really great feedback on my songs. It's like, you know what? There's no sunshine in that. I remember him telling me about you got to write something upbeat in that song, and that kind of advice is just really, really good to get from people. And for me in collaboration, a lot of it is just reaching out for feedback. Don't have a lot of people. I mean, my sister, she lives in Tennessee. She's a singer-songwriter, and Steve. Not a whole lot of other people in my life, really, to bounce stuff off of. My kid, William. That's about it. I'm pretty much a solo act, so it gets lonely here. So I really do appreciate Steve and all the support you've given me over the years. It's been great.
It's really nice to have a person in your life who's a fellow songwriter and poet that you can feel vulnerable with. I tried a song out with Sarah a couple of years ago, and her son's girlfriend was there, and I kind of flubbed on the song, and the girlfriend chided me for saying, she said something like, "Hey, I thought you were a professional musician. You should be prepared." And my response was, "This is the first time I've ever played it, and Sarah's my person who I can feel vulnerable with to try it out with."
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I don't remember that, but I know exactly how that went down.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, we talked earlier in the conference about writers finding beta readers, people, you trust that are not going to be mean, but they're not just going to say, "Oh, that's wonderful." They have that ability to offer helpful criticism without bruising you.
Mhm.
And I see Aaliyah nodding her head. It's helpful to have, I'm sure, a partner who's also in the creative arts too.
Yeah, and I was going to say just about finding people to collaborate with. If you do find yourself alone, I have a background in sketch comedy, and obviously, what I mentioned on the other panel, training at the Groundlings. And really, one of the best things I got from training there was a whole slew of collaborators that we were in the trenches together creating these sketches weekly. And so we just have this relationship that we built from that time, and a built-in trust, and we're all trying to rise together and learn together. And so a lot of those people are also people that I currently still collaborate with, just from training with them for so long. So I think people can find groups, through joining different comedy school. That's different than songwriting, but I'm sure there's other specified groups for songwriting as well, where
Mm.
people can find people to collaborate with.
Yeah, in the chat, I'm seeing that one of our participants talked about the importance of having a wife who is a great reader and giving great feedback.
Mm.
So we've heard that, and I think that's important. Now, I'm gonna stay with you for a second, Leah, because I don't know that many people that I've ever met who've had to write music to specifications for somebody else. And I imagine it's probably very specific length requirements or instrumentation. Can you talk
Yeah,
about that? I mean, how do you do that?
it's really challenging when I approach a lot from a parody. I've written a lot of parodies of different styles of songs, and as a comedic song parody writer, that's how I sort of one of the gigs I'll talk about is this branded Invisalign job that I had to do, that they wanted this funny song. So if you're just approaching a song yourself, you're like, oh, what do I think is funny and who's my audience I'm trying to serve? But then you have a brand that has a very specific audience. In this sense, they wanted to get teenagers to want to have Invisalign, and also they wanted parents to be okay with their kids having Invisalign, and they wanted it to be this hilarious song. And they want it, but you have to, there's legal things that you have to answer to, certain things that you can't say, or which is very challenging. And I was producing the song as well, so then I was kind of managing the song aspect, building of the song. And so you have the ad agency, and then you have the production company, and then you have a lot of notes that you're having to address, and back and forth to make everybody happy. And yes, like you said, the length, a 2-minute length, and they're making a music video of it. But again, you're not doing it alone. You have too many cooks in the kitchen usually. But as far as like writing for teenagers, that's something that I don't necessarily know the lingo, but the production company, there were a ton of younger people working there that could be like, no, don't use the word lit, that's not cool anymore, replace it with this word. So you have people weighing in and sort of helping shape it for the audience that you're writing it for. Sorry if that's answering anything. It's a challenging process. Okay.
Well, that gives us some insights into it. Now,
Yeah.
kind of coming back around to Sarah here, and it's like I say, I may fade off and just let you guys chat, but there's some things I really did want to get to, and so the collaboration was something we've talked about, the requirements. Sarah, and like you kind of alluded to this before when you talked about not having a whole cadre of musicians in your life. Certainly, you've got some really important and helpful people in the form of Steve and others that you've met through your time in Santa Cruz, I would assume. But you were mentioning when I was looking at your biographical material, and I didn't know this because I am so impressed with your music. You, to your way of describing it, you got a late start at doing this.
Well, I've been writing music. I've been writing I wrote songs for a lot when I was younger, but I didn't put them out there. I never considered myself a songwriter. I pretty much thought it was a fluke. I was a poet and a published poet, and I wasn't really thinking that I was a songwriter. I played the guitar. I had these songs, but for whatever reason, I didn't consider myself a songwriter at all. And then I had some friends. Actually, I have a friend over in Arcata, and he's a music teacher over there. And he said, "You have to put that stuff out there. You have to. It's it's really important." And it just dawned on me that maybe I was a songwriter. My sister's a songwriter. There's no reason why I wasn't, but it was just like it was just never anything that I ever ascribed to myself. And I'd put so much focus into poetry that I never really considered that anybody would ever even want to hear my songs. So I just decided on my 50th birthday, which was way back in the early Pleistocene, that I was going to just devote the next 10 years to songwriting, and I did that, and then went past that 10 years, and so we just keep on going through time, and just keep trying to do both. It's hard to do both too, because really music and poetry, they go together and they're important. But I have a hard time doing one and the other at the same time. Like, they're kind of separate. So
Well, that kind of leads to something I was going to get to with all of you, and that is, do you start with the words or the melody? I mean, I guess it just depends. There's always the answer, but I've actually got queued up on Spotify some of your music, and I don't know if I guess I can pipe it in here, but I was just wondering if you could comment maybe more specifically in some of the songs, like Waterfall Boy. How did that one come to be?
Okay, so this is one of the hardest questions people ask me, because I've had I'm thinking, Steve, you may be able to relate to this too. I don't know, but I until recently have been very unconscious when I write songs. That I can't even remember writing them a lot of times. All of a sudden I have a song. Waterfall Boy came because I have a son I've got two sons actually, and a husband now, who are crazy diehard kayakers, and they do insane stuff. And Waterfall Boy really came out of watching my son grow up, starting to learn. Actually, it was I think it was Nathan Van Zant who taught him how to roll on the Grand Ronde River, and he was about 14, and that's Steve's son. And then he just has been he's just been kayaking ever since. And then I don't know, that song just, it comes. But you know what? For me, it's usually melody and lyrics together. The song just comes out. And from talking to other people and listening to other people, that's not always their experience. Sometimes I'll sit down and just write lyrics because I have a really good head for poetry, and I'll write those down, and then I'll assign the melody, the music, the guitar. But I had to really concentrate on answering that question and really think about what I was doing so I could answer that, because it's all of a sudden just kind of there. And that's a terrible answer for anybody that's trying to learn how to write music. But yeah, that's how Waterfall Boy came about. It's about Ben.
Well, I was going to say, I usually start with an idea, like a funny idea, and usually a genre that I'm either not making fun of the entire genre, but you know what I mean? Like, for example, I wanted to write a kind of like a 90s R&B song, kind of like TLC, and make fun of a sexy song. And I wrote a song called Jean Jamming, which is about younger kids practicing safe sex with their jeans on. And it starts with an idea, right? And so I know the style that I'm parodying. So then from the idea, then I sort of create a song that sounds like that type of song, and then write the lyric from there. That's usually how I approach writing comedic songs.
For me, they usually just come at the same time, the lyrics and the melody. And I always think of lyrics shape melody, and melody shapes lyrics. So there's inherent music in lyrics, and if you start listening to the inherent music in the lyric, the music comes out. Then I sit down with my guitar and find that, and then that reshapes the lyrics. So it kind of plays back and forth. And there was something that in your session, Leah, that the other speaker, Leanne,
Leah.
she said about capturing the creative moment. And I've done that where I've captured the creative moment, but then I started to capture it and then let it go, and then it was gone. So that really spoke to me. But I don't always write when I look for a creative moment. I don't always write it down. And this is something I learned from a writing teacher. Um, is called rehearsing. And Lucy Calkins, she's a pretty well-known writing teacher, and she calls it rehearsing. And that is you're getting it in your head over and over and over again before you put anything on paper. I wrote a whole lullaby album that way driving to work, with the song going on in my head and singing it, and the lyrics and the word and the melodies coming out. And that rehearsing part, I think, is really vital. You grab that moment, but then you keep it going in your head. Sometimes when I write it down, I feel safe, and so it's there, and then I forget it and lose it. So that's why I like this rehearsing idea, keeping it in my head.
Do you never do a voice memo when you've rehearsed it?
Who's
That's
that?
what I'll do. Yeah, that's
The
what I have
same-
to do.
I mean, I think that's good, but for me, I sometimes, once it's recorded that way, I say, oh, I can leave it now, and then I don't work on it again. It's gone. And so I that diligence of keeping it in my head and keeping it going pushes me.
I know what you're talking about, Steve, because one of the things that happens sometimes for me is I'll get a hook, and that hook will come in as like, and it's really strong. And if I just keep that hook and leave it for like a week, I'll write a really good song. But it takes like that long. You have that hook in there, and all this creative stuff is going on in your brain, but you just leave it, and then you sit down, and that's what happens to me. And it just then a lot of good songs come out that way. The longer I leave it just hanging, but just keep it in my mind. But you write the whole song on the way to work in your brain.
I wrote 12 songs that way on my way to work and back. It was a 50-minute commute, so
You guys are really
took me
good.
about 2 weeks.
It's a good use of the commute.
I didn't have a radio.
That's impressive, and a wonderful exchange on that. So, are there things you do to kind of keep yourself growing musically? I mean, I'm sure you probably have artists you like and have been influenced by, or maybe go. I know outdoor. I don't know, Leah, if you're much of an outdoors person, but I know both Steve and Sarah would. I mean, she's outside now in her backyard. You can see how lovely it is. Um, so, and I know Steve lives outside a lot with his outdoor education, but I mean, what do you do to kind of feed and keep growing and going? I mean, money sometimes gets into it, but I mean, I think with both of, with both of you, all of you, that some of it is, it's just about that it lights you up. So how do you keep lit up?
I just take as many opportunities opportunities as I can to play, and it's been really hard during the pandemic. I've written a lot of songs just sitting in my living room, and Steve sent me some stuff that finally came through my email last night, and all of it reflected the pandemic, and it was really interesting because I think a lot of us have been doing that kind of thing, but just trying to play as often as possible. And I actually had a gig the other night, and it wasn't a gig that I really liked or would have wanted to take, but somebody called me and said, will you come sit outside this little restaurant and play music staring into the window and put your speaker inside? And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. We'll feed you dinner and give you some money. I'm like, okay. And there were motorcycles in the background, but it just made me so happy just to be able to put some of my new songs out there, even though I knew nobody was listening to them. So.
No, I think you're right. It's been a hard time because, I mean, for me, what I love most is live performance and sharing with a real audience that is enjoying what you're doing and having this back and forth. And not having that, it's been hard. I think during the pandemic, I've kind of pivoted and had social media be sort of where I'm putting my music and my art, and that's been helpful. And then also pivoting to some of these live stream things, which aren't the same, but it does help it feel that it's growing and that it's not just like stagnating, that I'm that I'm building to when things open up, that at least there might be more of an audience that will want to come out live and see something. So yeah, that's how I've sort of dealt with the pandemic.
I like what Sherry wrote here. She said she wrote her first novel on the way home from work, a whole novel in her head. For me, I remember one time going through what I call a creative desert, which I hate. I'm not so afraid of that anymore. I used to be very fearful of going through a creative desert. But I binged on Talking Heads for about 2 weeks and listened to Talking Heads on headphones for 2 weeks straight. And then when I came out of it, I had a song. So sometimes just diving into a genre of music or something like that really helps. I wanted to write a gospel tune for our Watershed album, and so I was starting to listen to a lot of gospel, and then it came out with that. So I think sometimes that helps. Conversations, news, listening to NPR or conversation. I had a conversation with this guy. He's complaining about the needles on a beach, and he said nothing as good as it used to be. And so I wrote a song based on that, because he must have said nothing's good as it used to be like 10 times. So I added that to every single line of the song. So using conversations that you have with people really helps. And just, I think what happens is sometimes you're not open to those things. And so keeping yourself trying to remember that the seeds of those types of creative inputs are out there, always out there, and you have to keep yourself your pores open for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think too, Steve, I mean, this is just me thinking, just like we've been around the sun a few times, and so you go through those dead times, and when the muse is not speaking, and yeah, it used to be really freaky because you're thinking, is she ever going to come back? She always does,
Yeah.
You just have to have that kind of faith and
Yeah.
put yourself in the right places to make sure you can receive that when it comes to you.
Okay.
Dry
Make sure
spot.
my microphone's turned on here. So, one of the standard things that when I talk to people that are creatives, it's a journey, and there are things that happen that are wonderful, things that happen that you could have done without. There's people who have helped. And so I guess what I would ask is, the one of the stock questions is, what do you know now you wish you'd known then? But kind of along with that, what have you done that has put you in touch with people who've helped you? And I don't mean that in a kind of a promotional networking way. I mean, in terms of fed your spirit or kind of opened your eyes. How do you come across them in your lives? Sarah commented that she started at a point, said, a teacher said, you just got to start doing this. So how do you find those people that do that for you?
How do you find them? You just get lucky? I don't know.
One thing that I did a couple of years ago, I save up. I'm a teacher, so we know how rich I am. But I have this little account that I save all my music money in. And I went to a John McCutcheon concert here in town. And some of you might know John McCutcheon. He's a world-renowned folk musician from that folk era that's gone, but he's kind of one of the last remaining people there. And he did this little concert here in Reading, and he mentioned that he did a songwriters camp, and I'm like, there's no way I could afford that. And then I looked, and I had just about that much money in my little savings account, so I went, and it was great. Like, I went to Tennessee, and spent 5 days with John McCutcheon and 14 other people. And I learned so much. And that totally fed me. I'm still writing on that. And that was maybe 2 years in May that I did the John McCutcheon Songwriters Camp outside of Knoxville. But he taught me a lot. And so, you seek out the people. If you can do things like that, you do it. And if you can't, you hang out with the musicians that you can most identify with, and the poets you can most identify with, and read a lot of poetry. I find reading poetry is really good too, that way.
Leah?
Steve, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'll go. I wanted to give you the first option.
It's okay. I don't know what I would say about that.
Well, what struck me was what in the last session, what John said about being creative. And I wrote down the quote. I don't remember exactly what he said, but what he meant was this. It was just this idea of when you talk about creativity, that spurs more creativity. And I think finding people that enjoy the creative process, for me, it's being around people that enjoy the creative process. So even this workshop and listening to people's creativity through this workshop is a creative venture. So talking to people about creativity, just the process, whether they're artists or writers or poets or whatever, songwriter, just that creative process that people go through is creatively stimulating. And even as an educator, that process is going on all the time. So I feel lucky and blessed to be around a lot of educators who are always going through the creative process as well.
We can move on to another job. I mean,
Okay.
I just feel very lucky that my partner that I live with is somebody who is a creative, and I've always been drawn to that. I feel like it is such a huge part of me, and it's so wonderful to be able to share that with my partner every single day. Like, we watch movies, we pick them apart, we talk about what worked, what didn't work. Both of us just love talking about works of art, and that is awesome. That's all I can say.
Well, and you've had some specific training that no doubt's helped. I mean, going to a renowned school that.
Yes. Okay. So you're talking about, that's what I was touching on earlier too, is just like, if you don't know what to do, you'll find a whole community of people by going to a training school, at the Groundlings, at Second City, at whatever your specific genre is. Yeah. Meet people through going to class.
Yeah, and somebody commented that the Groundlings probably.
It reminded me. That's what I've done.
And one of our chat comments said that Ray Bradbury tried to come up with ideas by making lists of things and just kind of jogging his brain. We heard John Vorhaus talk about that a little bit last time, but I don't know, if there's any. I mean, I talked about people, but are there any ways you trick yourself? We heard. Peter going to fall on the floor here. Steve talked about the concern, less of a concern now about being in a creative desert. So I guess, we talk about people. Are there any techniques or things that kind of help you keep going if you find you're in a flat spot? I mean, Steve, I don't know if you found something to do, or how have you learned not to be afraid about that?
Last summer, not this one, not pandemic summer, but the before times, I was preparing to lead a songwriting workshop, and I wanted to try out some of the techniques that I talk about. And so I started listing in my journal, just whenever a lead line came up, a hook line, or in a novel, it would be a lead line, right? The first line of a novel that draws you in. So hook lines and just quick lines. If I heard something on the radio that reminded me of something, so I just started writing these down. This is like making lists. And I wouldn't get but 10, 5 to 10 going, and pretty soon I was on to a song. And this happened like 3 or 4 times in a row, I was trying to collect these lines, just random lines, and they kept drawing me into new songs. So that's a technique. I think that works pretty well.
You know, I like to keep junk piles. And it was something a poetry teacher taught me a long time ago, was just, you know, you write a poem and then you just take stuff out and that you don't need, because you don't need to keep everything. And it's the same way with music, you know, or songs. You know, you may have a really great line or a really great stanza, but it's too much for the piece you're writing. So then you just kind of make this pile, and you've got a pile going. And when you are out of things, you look at the junk pile because it's full of stuff that you really liked when you wrote it, and it's actually pretty good. You just couldn't use it then. So then you can just draw from the junk pile. And junk piles are great. I even have a file called junk pile, and it's just full of junk, but there's all kinds of good stuff in there.
Yeah, I have a similar just lists of ideas. But then as a performer primarily who's like serving my own shows, what I will do is just set a performance. Like I just did this Easter live stream. I wasn't much feeling like it. I didn't know if I'd have anything for it, but just like setting this deadline in a couple weeks, then, you know, then I got to come up with some stuff for it because it's coming. And that kind of forces me. Hopefully, yeah. Yeah, deadlines force me.
You're muted, Rob. I see your lips moving.
Power of deadlines.
Yeah.
Power of deadlines. That's a
Even
good
if they're
thing.
self-imposed, you know.
Yeah, I've found that myself with assignments where, you know, I've had to write an album. I've collaborated with an educator for 3 different albums, and by having those assignments, we got to get this album done on these subject: pollinators, water cycle, watersheds, etc. By doing that, then it opens you up. It opens you up to thinking all the time about it.
Right.
Good. I'm taking notes here. And other people, the good thing about the chat column is it's actually saved along with the recording. So I'm seeing some really cool stuff I'm going to go back to and look at. So I'm grateful for our participants offering some suggestions on Bradbury and whatever. Now, I mean, we live in an age of a lot of technology, and people's attitudes are different about that. I hesitate to ask this, but I'm wondering, are there websites that are helpful to you as a musician, of experienced musicians? I mean, do you still hunt around for old sheet music or obscure records? Or I mean, what sort of things does someone who's a musician look for on the web that others might not, others that are kind of word people? What do you look for, and how does it help you?
I'm constantly searching for obscure Broadway songs. And there's a guy in New York who has all of the sheet music you can't find anywhere else. And you just email him and you ask him for it. And he always, for whatever reason, has a huge database of like stuff that's out of print. And we'll email it to you. And you send him $10 via Venmo for every song you get. But that's what I'm constantly doing.
For me, it's a constant battle because I'll decide, oh, I want to. I looked up an old song that I used to play in my repertoire called "A Delicate Balance," and of course, I found it on the internet, and I found good versions of it. And you can go way back, and I found some old songs that I wanted to learn. But I'm constantly going back and forth between repertoire building, wanting to learn those songs, and then once I start doing that, it kicks me into a creative mode, and then I start writing a song, and then I leave off my repertoire building. So it's a battle back and forth.
Yeah, I just I'll wake up with a song that I hadn't heard for 10 or 15 or 20 years. You know, just something old from the 60s, and you start going down those wormholes, you find all kinds of interesting things. And it's always a Google search, you know, and then it's like, I remember that band. Oh, they had great stuff. And then, you get them up on Spotify, and then,
Yeah.
you hear everything that they've done, and it puts you in a place, and it can trigger a lot. So,
Yeah, I think we're very lucky that we have Spotify, and if you can't find it on Spotify, you usually can find it on YouTube. I mean, technology serves us.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of stuff that could never be music videos, are music videos now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Pretty cool, some of the stuff that's out there, and you're like, wow.
Mhm.
And in those days, they didn't have, any of the. It really amazes me when I hear the 1960s stuff, because they didn't have any of the voice equalizing. They didn't have any of the high tech electronics that we have now to get everything right on pitch and everything lined up and everything in a click track. They didn't have that kind of stuff. They just got up there and did it, and they were amazing. You look at the mamas and the papas, and you just go, wow, they were just amazing. They really, really were. There were a lot of bands like that.
Leah, didn't we do that when I was visiting you? Didn't we? Because you hadn't heard 5 Foot Blue Eyes, 5'2" Eyes
Yeah,
of
we
Blue.
looked that up. I looked up the
Yeah.
chords.
I
Or
like
the
that.
lyrics.
Somebody just typed in the chat that they have a document that says scary things overheard in restaurants. I think that's really funny.
Yeah.
You could
That's
write.
great.
That's
A
a
lot of
very
lot
good.
of songs you can
Commented
write
on
from
that. That caught my attention. That was great. Go, Jeff. Well, I have been reminded we have cool questions coming in, and I need to look at them. And one of these, I think Leah talked about it a little while ago, and that is, what about copyright when you're doing parody music? I mean, kind of how do you deal with that?
Yeah, you're right. I should I should know more about that. It depends on if you're monetizing it. And frankly, like most of what I'm parodying, uh if I'm doing it live, they'll have a blanket license that makes it allowed. I've worked with other groups that get sent cease and desist letters, but then by the time the run's over, they're like, they're not going to come after us. I've been a part of shows. I don't approach things that way. But
Right.
but yeah, the monetization, it's only if you're really trying to make money doing it, and I have yet to put an album of my parody songs on Spotify and see how much money I can make from that. But you have to license songs for sure. If you're doing a straight parody of a song. But I don't do that as often as just parodying kind of the idea and sort of the genre. So if it's different enough, you're not going to get in trouble.
Inspired by a real song.
Yes.
Hey, Weird Al can parody any of my songs anytime. I'll give you complete permission.
We should be so lucky. No kidding. Yeah. Well, I'm going to move on. Like I said, I do want to get to the questions. We've had some interesting ones. How do you feel? This is another question. How do you feel about rhyming in music? And are there any tips on how to break away from rhyming if you feel you're using it too much? I guess even poetry, for that matter.
Well, it's golden to be able to write a song without rhymes. I don't know if I've ever even done that. That would be really hard to do.
Mhm.
So I always appreciate songs without rhymes because they're difficult. How do you get away from it? I can't. I love Bob Dylan too much to get away from rhyming for myself.
In poetry, it's really easy to do because it's really all about the rhythm and the way the words fit together. With music, it's a lot harder. And one of the things that makes it difficult is it's very hard to learn a song that doesn't rhyme. I mean, if the words don't make sense together, it does. For me, it doesn't go into my brain pattern very well. But I think when you're talking rhyming, one of the things that is really useful in songwriting is to put internal rhymes in your words. So, like for example, in like Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, that has all this internal rhyme, and if you think about it, you got a line, and then inside that line there was a rhyme. So that's what makes that song so good and so catchy. Those rhymes are, really tight, and they're exact. They're true rhymes, and they fit right in the rhythm, and then they're right inside of another phrase that rhymes, and then in the middle of that there's a rhyme. So that's an internal rhyme, and that actually is really good when you can pull that kind of thing off.
Okay.
Like Mama Pajama rolled out of bed and she ran to the police station. When Papa found out, he began to shout and they started the investigation. There's your internal rhyme. And, you know, and
Yeah.
you remember that forever. It never goes away, you know.
Internal rhymes are beautiful, and you can really get into a rhythm with it. One thing that I talk to song people who are, you know, just kind of learning the rhyme and writing songs is what I've noticed with a lot of people. They move along with their verses and their stanzas, and then they get to this last part that's supposed to rhyme, and it backs them into a corner, and so they choose a rhyming word that really isn't that great of a thing to add to it's not maybe what they want to say, but they either do an off rhyme or something that might work. And what I always say is go backwards. It's called backward rhyming. So then you work with what you want to say at the end, and then you change the lines that come before that will then support that rhyme. So rather than just working yourself straight into a corner, you work backwards.
And don't ever rhyme something just for the sake of making it rhyme, because
Exactly.
then it sounds contrived. You're better finding a slant rhyme or different words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Well, let me look at some other questions here. I've got them coming in. So
Phoebe on Friends, all her songs didn't rhyme. That's
well,
what
somebody wants to know with all the guitars in the background, if somebody's going to sing. That's got votes.
There can be a lot of comedy that comes from not rhyming a song, you know.
That's true.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is the most voted on question. And again, I'll repeat myself. With all those guitars in the background, is anybody going to sing? Well,
yeah, Steve, go grab a guitar.
I mean, it won't sound very good over that, like,
yeah, it
sounds like a sitar.
Well, I have to tell you that song Steve was talking about. I think I know the one when he was talking about he studied the Talking Heads. And then he goes, hey, I got this song. And he didn't tell me he'd been studying the Talking Heads. And he sings this song about lizards. And I'm like, how much Talking Heads did you listen to? And he goes, I can tell. Was that the song?
That's it.
That's a good song, Steve. And all the kids in my school know it. They all do.
that is fun. Well, I will tell you, those of you interested, as a matter of fact, let me go on and do something now to reveal the call to action. And basically, it's a bunch of books, but it also there's some links to both the Banana Slugs album and Sarah's album, one of them. I mean, the Slugs have many albums, but if you're interested in, and I've got, like I said, I've queued up a bunch of Spotify stuff to listen to. I was going to play it over lunch, and then we had some tech stuff we had to do, but I'll make sure you have the link to these things, because you do need to hear them, and they are wonderful. So I don't know. You know, one of the standard things I like to hear. Well, let me look at the questions, because I'm deadline. We talked a little bit about deadlines. Somebody wants to know, Sarah, how did you meet the Banana Slugs?
Me?
Yeah. How did you meet?
How I know those guys?
Yeah.
They were just a bunch of crazy naturalists that did really good campfires. And we would say, you're so good, you should be a band. And they're like, yeah. But you know what? The funny thing is, like the way Steve was discussing their collaboration, they've been doing that for 40 years. It's a marriage. 4 guys are married. It's amazing to watch. And they collaborate well. But they, you know, they're on stage, hilarious, wonderful. If you've never seen a Slug concert, you definitely should do it. It's really good. Yeah, see, that's it. And it's really about cheap theatrics. It's really about cheap theatrics.
Oh my gosh.
I'm Twitchy the squirrel. Hi.
It's really
It only bugs you.
The concerts.
Exactly.
Well, Leah's mother was an actress, and she saw one of my shows.
My grandmother.
Said,
my grandmother.
Huh?
My
No,
grandmother.
her grandmother, excuse me, my aunt. And she saw one of my shows, and I said, "How was my acting?" And she goes, "That wasn't acting. That was just a shtick."
She was a serious actor.
Yeah.
It's a shtick. Well,
Shtick.
we call it cheap theatrics, but it really works.
It does work. Hey.
So,
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. So let me see here. We got that question's been answered. Let's go back to this just briefly because this did turn up a question. To how do deadlines or routines help or hurt you when you're trying to do something creative?
I don't.
They
I
help
don't
me.
under-
They help me because I go to sleep thinking about it. So it makes me do it. It makes me continue. I can't. It becomes almost. We did a commissioned album in the Tetons, and all the rest of the slugs were out. We were taken out with naturalists, and we to learn about the natural history of the Tetons. The rest of the slugs were having a great time listening to everybody talking and everything. I was in my head the entire time writing lyrics. So for me, it becomes just every waking moment, eating, sleeping, that creative process. So it helps.
I was going to say, I don't really think it necessarily hurts because even if you create a deadline for yourself and then you write stuff that isn't the greatest and then you perform it and it tanks, you're still learning, you know?
I don't. The only deadline that I ever have is on Friday mornings by 9:30. I have to get a set of lyrics to the administrator at my school so we can do our online Zoom meeting. So it's the only deadline I ever have with music. So you guys are out of my league. I never have deadlines other than get Catherine whatever song I'm going to sing so she can get it up there on the Zoom thing. The other deadline I've got is I've got 6% left. I thought for sure my battery would last longer, so hopefully it'll keep
Well,
going.
we have like 1 minute left, and I want to honor your time. I know that when we set this thing, I was so excited the first Saturday of April, it didn't occur to me it was Easter weekend. So I know for a lot of people, that complicated things a lot for a lot of people, and I'm grateful you could be here with us. And please do keep making your music and let us know how we can support you, come to your performances or whatever. We have a newsletter that we're going to be putting out, and I'm more than happy to make sure that people know. I know you have your own promotional means and on social channels, and that's great. We'll look for you there too. But I want to thank you. I think we have a lot to learn, and I'm hoping that in the audience, the participants feel comfortable reaching out to you, and maybe that in the next session there'll be some really interesting talk about animation, and the ability you have. I mean, Leah's already writing stuff that gets put onto video, and Steve and company do the hilarious videos, and Sarah's got a great sense of theatrics. But I think the more we can reach to other creative people, the better off we are. So I thank you for being a part of this, and I hope you'll allow us to keep in touch with you in ways that are helpful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And Rob, that handout that I sent you on songwriting, you can post that for people.
Oh, I will. Oh,
Yeah.
you know what? I will. What I'll do is I may sneak it out the next session. I need to wrap this down and get in the next one, but I'll send it out. I'll upload it to my website and have a link. And if you want to limit accessibility to just the people in this conference or however you want to do that, that's fine. You just let me know what you want me to do.
Put it out there.
Give it up.
Okay, well, I'm going to end this session and then start the next. So you're welcome to stick around, but I know you're busy people. Like I say, I hope you can hang for the animators. They are a fascinating team. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
again, educators, you'd appreciate this. Educators again. So bye all.
Thank you.